Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, we've got some great comments from the YouTube channel and some updates to go over, so buckle up. Here we go. Going back a few weeks ago, we've got one that came in. Oh, and also the way that this works is if I read your comment, then I would love you to reach out to me, bigfootsociety@gmail.com. So that means that means I do want to talk to you more about what you're talking about. About half of the interviews on this podcast come from follow-ups from YouTube comments. So just a heads up on that. If you hear your comment read, reach out to me, please. All right, on the first Carrie interview, Bigfoot Ran Us Out of Tennessee, Part 1, Tony Bahama 6817 says, I live 40 miles southwest of there, and I've heard the screaming in the hills around me. My neighbor has them by her yard, old Cherokee lands. My house was slapped twice after I attempted mind speaking, so I bless my property and they don't come by anymore. Too wild. So there you go. Bigfoot Ranch Part 1, Stacy Hughes 8771 writes, I'm from Wapello County in Iowa, and I lived in Keogh for a couple years. That area is saturated with BFs, among other things. Make no mistake, these are people, not creatures, not animals. There are things in those categories in the woods, but Bigfoots are people, although different, but no less people. Stacy, reach out. I'd love to hear more about that area. From episode 403, Intense Bigfoot Encounters of Southeast Missouri, user writes, I'm from Southern Illinois, a 49-year-old man. I would love to go check this out. I've always been an avid hunter and fisherman, and I've always noticed some weird things. I'm not saying I had an encounter at all as far as I know, but I'm definitely interested more now that I'm older. When you're a young buck running through the woods, you always think you're the apex predator walking around with a high-powered rifle or a 12-gauge with deer slugs. But I have to be honest, looking back, I've had some happenings where I felt the need to leave the woods. I always just blew it off because I never even imagined that there was something out there. If you had a showdown, you took a shot with a deer slug. But now I've been watching these shows for about a year or two now, and I look at things a little differently. I don't really feel the need to have a firearm when going on hikes and whatnot. It's such an awesome idea that there could be a big hairy beast running through the woods. All my friends and family would think I'm nuts. They found out I've been watching these shows almost nightly for the past 2 years. Well, folks, be safe out there. And don't tick one off if you run into one. From episode 423, the Great Barrington, Berkshires, Massachusetts episode, Keller Eaton 4467 writes, what's crazy is I'm also from Western Mass and have 2 experiences in Westfield and 2 in Beckett, Mass. I now live in South Carolina in the Sumter National Forest, and I'm experiencing low-level stuff here. These things are everywhere. Keller, reach out, friend. Bigfoot on my family farm, 478, I believe. Mega Lynn 76 Hello 46 writes, Bigfoot Society, can I have the info for North Carolina? I have hair samples. All right, so here it goes. What you're going to do is you're going to go to Google and you're going to search for Darby Orcutt, DARBYORCUTT. And there's a website that's going to come up. It's like sites.google.com or something like that. And it's an older looking site, but that will get you to the area where you can click on a form link in there, and then you can submit. It tells you how to submit your samples, and you don't have to pay for it. As of the time of this recording, I'm trying to get Darby on the show so we can talk about this more and get the word out, but I haven't had the sign up yet. But Darby, if you're listening, the offer is always open. On the Pennsylvania Police Officer, episode 425, user writes, you have to camp out in the NorCal wilderness on the Klamath River. There have been a lot of sightings there, and there are even Bigfoot museums and hotels there in Willow Creek. Camping on the Klamath River is free and true wilderness. You just drive out to the riverbank and car camp most anywhere. Use respect and treat the natives with respect and distance. I've never had a sighting other than a giant mountain lion and the whispering of ancient Native American voices along the river. Watch where you build a fire. Only build it in a safe space on the riverbank where there is just cobbles. Back to Carrie's episode, Bigfoot Ran Us Out of Tennessee, Part 1. Hub City Man writes, that's what happened on my girlfriend's land where there was a lot of Bigfoot activity. Her box truck was always getting picked apart for some reason. It's totally remote out there, and little pieces of metal and plastic were always being ripped off. Remember, every comment that I'm reading, I want you guys to reach out, bigfootsociety@gmail.com, especially that one. Country, classic country, the Oklahoma Bigfoot Bounty Hunter episode. Joe Aragon A91 writes, camped out in the Arbuckles with my wife, grandson, and dog. We seen small human footprints on the shore of Lake Arbuckles and heard strange sounds that night. After listening to this, it just reaffirmed my suspicions. Very interesting and would like to meet Country since we both live near each other. I mean, I would love to talk to Country again, too. The offer is always out there for him, and maybe someday he'll take it up. Pennsylvania Police Officer episode. Living the Dream LOL 9258 writes, I live in Southwest PA, and I think I heard one of them imitating a hawk that I filmed vocalizing. I thought it was two hawks going back and forth, but when I listen again, the one call of whatever's calling to the hawk, I'm filming the hawk, doesn't sound quite like a bird to me. I thought it was a human, maybe, but recalling that day, there were no other humans at the park. It's very small with a tiny wooded area, except my kids, and none of us can make that sound. There were also bamboo sticks laying around I got a picture of, but I have no clue if that was kids before or what. Episode 243, the Elijah Henderson episode. Adrenu 4731 says, I have a tree knocker in my woods, Blackberry Mountain, East Tennessee. Reach out, sir. On Michael May's Area X episode way back, Kevin Paddlety, JJ5MG, writes, I know they're real, and in the Kiamichis, I own a farm outside Albion, Oklahoma, 9 miles from Tallahena, and had some experiences. Over the mountain is Honubby. Kevin, I've attempted to reach out to you multiple times because I've seen your comments all over the place. I would love to talk to you, sir. I don't know if you check your Facebook messages, but please reach out to me, bigfootsociety@gmail.com. I would really like to talk to you. It's a comment that came in on my episode with Miguel from Sasquatch Theory 488. Juan Vigil 8913 writes, my daughter and I both seen 2 orbs in Pueblo, Colorado at night on New Year's. We live in a cul-de-sac where you can see the whole city in a panoramic view. It was midnight, so we went to see all the fireworks, and as we were watching fireworks, 2 round orbs from a distance of half the city came floating towards us where we were standing. They were so unusual because I know what military flares look like. I was born and raised in Colorado Springs, which is near Fort Carson Army Base. These orbs didn't make any sound as they approached us to where they were only maybe 30 to 40 yards above us. They were right next to each other, one slightly above the other, when they just stopped and stayed there for approximately 2 to 3 minutes, which seemed forever. Because we felt they were intelligent staring at us. They were orange, round, like 2 basketballs, but they didn't change colors, flicker, or anything like that. I felt like I needed to get my daughter and I back into the house for safety, and with no explanation or sound, they took off and headed south towards Walsenburg, Colorado, in which they flew way over there like lightning speed. We ran into the house, and I double-locked the doors and closed all the window blinds for fear, and I'm Christian, and I know fear is not of the Lord, but that's not it. I had another experience while hunting in Sagouche, Colorado, which I believe was Bigfoot, and that was a creepy experience as well. That'll take me longer to explain to you. Reach out, my friend. Back to the police officer's encounter episode. This is the old one, 244. Louis Zimmerman 4958 says, I had a run-in with Bigfoot. Love to tell about it. Most of my friends think I'm crazy, so I don't talk about it. But had more than one encounter. Can reach out, friend. Carrie's episode, Bigfoot ran us out of Tennessee, part 1. Lee Marino 7453. I live 10 minutes from her. Once again, they are here. Greene County, Viking Mountain Road. It's real. I had a short where I was about who to talk to about Bigfoot in a new town. Vampy TN writes, Jeremiah, I just recently found your channel. You're one of the kindest hosts, and your voice has lulled me to sleep, which is a good thing for the past week. The part I missed while asleep, I have to go back and rewatch. Your patience with guests is amazing too, and I'm happy to have caught a live. Great shows. I thank you. Hope you're well. Take care. Going back to watch on TV, I can only comment from my phone, but I'll be back, though. Thank you for the kind words. Denny's episode, Southeast Oklahoma's Bigfoot Encounters, which is 458. Jamie Roberts 9395 writes, this interview is awesome. I used to live off of 144 at Ludlow. I know for a fact these things are real. I've seen a family of them in the Poteau River one day going on my way to Poteau. I just seen them. It was like a family of them. Would love to talk to you. Back in the country episode, 475, Cheryl Nichols 5339 writes, one was here. They drug it and dragged it out of my yard. Then some guy comes and tells me how they removed it. He said airlifted it out. Cheryl, let's chat. The ICP episode, I was freight trained by Sasquatch. Douglas Retzer writes, they don't care if you fire up. Seems like it interested them. My observations, I've seen hundreds in Pennsylvania, hundreds. He also writes, I've gotten a hug from one, became friends on November 10th, 2014. She shared her body heat and warmed me up, but I became energized also. Like for 2 days, I was fully energized. So cool. Reach out, Douglas. The delivery man who discovered Bigfoot. A lot of people have liked Arturo's episode. A lot of people are saying it should be a movie. It's an incredible story. Episode 491. Check it out if you haven't. SP Grandpa 1 writes, Byron low-key works for the feds. Haha. I can tell you nothing more is further from the truth. I definitely do not work for the feds. I'm sure the feds are aware of the podcast. I don't have anything to back that up, but I will say that on most of my interviews, which are phone interviews, usually we have phone connectivity issues, and during certain parts of the account, the phone will just hang up. So do with that what you will, but no, I don't work for the feds. Good joke. Also, on the same episode, Janny the Wonder Woman 2215. This is such a great story. I have a story that also happened around 1978-ish in Mill City, Oregon. A friend and I were lost on a hike and something guided us out to the road. Janny, reach out, please. Got a nice comment on a post. Jeremiah, you have a great podcast. You got my support, my channel support, Dirt Road Bigfoot, Wayland C. That's a great channel, guys. Check out Dirt Road Bigfoot. I enjoy it. It's one of the newer ones that I enjoy. Back to the Miguel episode. Milo Aaron 8388 writes, if you whoop at them or make a conscious effort to communicate with them, you give them spiritual permission to come into your life. And that's what I wholeheartedly believe. I've had my own encounters, and after everything I've learned, I believe that is the truth. If you want these encounters to stop, I would suggest asking God for help. I also believe that it's very important if you've had enough. Milo, let's chat. On the Who to Talk to about Bigfoot in Newtown, Kaz Abergan, hope I said that right, writes, old timers. Old people typically are an archive of information. They know where the bodies are buried. And that's in quotation. Well, it should be in quotations. They're not really, well, maybe, but I don't know. Befriend them, buy them coffee and a pastry, listen to their stories carefully. Above all, don't lose your objectivity. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Great advice there. A lot of people like the Tom Cantrell episode, Face to Face with Sasquatch on the Go Road. Rhonda MC writes, wow, what an interview. It was crazy good. My family and friends think I'm crazy for believing in these beings. I'd love to be able to see them one of these days. I just have no one that will go camping with me. Rhonda, it's great to hear from you again. I remember talking to you a while back. The comment that came in on her comment is very interesting. Daniel Kennedy 3073 writes, I see them here in I see them here in Alaska camping alone. Daniel, please reach out. I'd love to talk to you. Carrie's episode is very popular. Bigfoot ran us out of Tennessee, Part 1. Ginger Sowers 8315 writes, I believe everything you've said. I know the road you lived on in Newport. I was born and raised in Cobb County in the little town of Del Rio. I was raised on the Smith Farm on Blue Mill Road. They were always around the farm too. The saying you always hear about when it gets dark, everyone is inside for the night. We were in before dark with the curtains pulled and the doors shut and locked. We were in before dark. They're a mysterious type of people the government does not want us to believe is real. Well, they are real, very real. And they are not the only ones out there. They're not the most dangerous. Thank you for sharing. May God walk by your side and always give you to him. I think I read that wrong. Always give your to him. He will protect you. Ginger, reach out, please. Would love to talk to you. Here's an interesting comment that came on the delivery episode from Chris Aguilar 6699. The famous writer Zane Grey was the first to record the story of the 4 miners killed by a Sasquatch in 1922. This happened near the town of Gallus, which is near the county line between Josephine and Douglas counties. Twice I've hiked to the cabin site of the famous Ape Canyon attack. The Gallus killings happened in the same time period as the Fred Beck story, yet that attack remains overlooked. From the Gallus area all the way west to the Pacific Ocean, there are numerous tales of violent Sasquatch forcing miners to flee for their lives. These stories are from the late 1800s to the 20s. And driving home from Crater Lake in 2017, we drove Highway 138 to reach I-5 all through Douglas County. The dark forest came all the way to the roadside. We were so creeped out, we wouldn't even stop to use the restroom. Also on the same one, Michael Stoltz, 58, writes, what a story. I heard a story about a sighting in the hills up above Chino Hills. I guess that would be in the same area Arturo saw the caveman. I'm from Southern Cal. Never thought there would be any big feats in SoCal. But I've heard stories about Big Bear and Edwards Air Force Base too. I camp a lot and wonder. Just wonder. Late Night 756 responds, says, the first BF Sasquatch creature I ever saw was just before Idlewild, California in 1964. I reached out to connect with Claudia Ackley, rest in peace, to hopefully help her with her situation, but learned that she passed. I grew up in Riverside, San Bernardino County. I know these creatures are there. The food source is amazing. Late Night, please reach out. Also on the same video, Brooks Van de Velder, 447, writes, having spent many years in Williams, Oregon, growing, I can picture all this clearly. There's an old Sasquatch trap near Applegate Reservoir built in the 1930s. Tons of sightings in the area. Reach out. Continuing, Late Night also writes, in addition to my previous comment about Idlewild, Riverside, San Bernardino counties, my brother lived in Cave Junction, Oregon. It was not far from there that our RV was surrounded by Sasquatch one night. We had 3 teenagers and 2 dogs with us. My husband's grandfather was the sheriff of Shasta County. My husband had never heard of this creature, but clearly heard their sounds, chatter, and experienced the rock throwing at our RV. They clearly did not want us there, but intended no harm. It was horrifying. Definitely reach out. JD's Modern Martial Arts writes in response, I heard 3 roar screams at night in the backyard of the Deer Creek Ranch in Selma. It was up on $8 Mountain. I could feel the power. I was planning on hiking up the mountain to deer hunt. That thing seemed to let me know not to go up there, and I never will. JD also writes, I live in Grants Pass, and what he says about Wolf Creek or surrounding area is true. Sasquatch is definitely around too. I heard a big one roar scream from John Wayne's former ranch, the Deer Creek Ranch in Selma. Feeling that power, the volume and duration puts the folklore thinking right away. You can no longer deny Sasquatch is real after that. Dude, I get it. I've been there, and I get it. Not there, but I've experienced what you experienced. Let's chat. In the horrifying Alaska Bigfoot Encounters episode, Daniel Kennedy 3073 writes, I grew up in the Copper Valley. I have property there that I camp on in the summer. Just last year, 2 Sasquatch crossed the road in front of me right after I arrived. I'm always on high alert there. Daniel, reach out, please. Same episode, Donna Spencer 7219. Yes, they acted like owls and laughed at me. They left greasy lip prints on my van windows. They knew who I was and followed me wherever I moved. I had a Bigfoot come through an enclosed utility trailer in Mindspeak to say he was there to protect me. They've thrown pebbles at my back door to get my attention to come outside to interact with me or my dogs. Donna, please reach out. Pirate Style 2013 on the ICP episode. I'll host Violent J. I'm not guaranteeing, but I do have a formula to get activity. I don't do it just to do it because I already know it works by accident. And every encounter can scare me. I've lost friends because of them witnessing these events. Reach out, Pirate Style. I'd love to talk to you. On the Pennsylvania Police Officer episode, Mr. Read and Learn writes, I've spent a great amount of time soloing in the Adirondacks and have been lucky enough to see tracks of animals that, according to the rangers, do not exist in the state. After reporting enough sightings, I was told by one ranger that I should not talk about it or hunters would try to kill them. I now believe they are in the business of deceiving the public while repopulating many species that were hunted because they were a danger to early settlers, natives, and explorers who would be at risk simply because the competition for resources, not so much a fear of direct attack. I've never found sign of any large bipedals. Maybe someday I will, but until then, the posts and interviews are enough for me to believe that these creatures do exist and are simply avoiding us because we are a danger to them. And they are intelligent enough to study us and teach to their kind what they learn over generations. Same episode. My MTI writes, my buddy and I had a close encounter with a watcher back in the mid-70s on Rush Creek on the June Lake Loop in the High Sierras, California, up by Mammoth. One and only time. Spooky, interesting, calming experience all in one. Let's chat, my friend. Surviving the Night, the Lone Guardian versus the Bigfoot. That's a Tennessee one. Diane Morrissey 9764 also writes, I used to hike in 2,300 acres of woods in the middle of the city and had many indications that maybe a Bigfoot has passed through them. The first one was when my dog, who always ran ahead on the trails, gave a yelp and came running back. Another time, I kept hearing huge trees come crashing down, and although it caught my attention, I put it off as root rot because it wasn't a windy day. Another time, my dog would stop in her tracks and wouldn't go any further on trails we always took. Sometimes I would smell something foul like a mix of skunk and strong urine in areas that didn't before. Whistles, an area where there's a lot of brush and pine trees. So each time I heard them, I could see nothing. A few times my dog would bark at something just off the trail, but I couldn't see anything. One of those times I had to tie her to a tree for a minute to check on something, and she started barking. I looked towards the direction she was barking, and I saw something run away that was translucent. I didn't know what it was, but since listening to these shows, I'm wondering if it was a Bigfoot, but who knows? On the original Mark Paul episode 256, Douglas Retzer writes, they are the Watchers. It tells you everything about them, just like our world. They watch us in the world Had hundreds of interactions. Only 2 I was scared, both in 1991. Kept me out of the woods for almost 20 years. I went maybe 2 times in 20 years. On the last 494 comment episode, Charles Devlin writes, would love to talk to you about an incident that happened around Somerville, Georgia. Reach out. I'd love to talk to you too. Same episode, Louder Than Life 66 writes, we believe we know we are in Indiana, southern Indiana, and a lot of cryptic stuff happening here. Reach out. I would love to hear. Back to Police Officer, episode 244, Kristen Burkhardt Hansen writes, I'm from Michigan. I'm from the Detroit area, the northeast suburbs, but we would vacation up north often. I've been in the Upper Peninsula a handful of times, and one thing I can tell you, it's a whole different world up there. It's very disconnected. It's very rural, barren, isolating, and dangerous. I can't imagine being out there at night in a cabin by myself. When I was married to my first husband, we honeymooned upon Whitefish Bay. We had a cabin on the bay, but we had cabins around us, and we would have to drive 5 miles into town, and that road we had to go down was terrifying at nighttime. You had to go about 25 miles an hour because deer and moose would come out. So I did what he's talking about. I would not want to be where he's at. And not anyone is a glamorous storyteller. Not everybody is designed to tell us stories in a way that leaves us hanging by a thread. People have an experience and they're sharing it, and that's what's really important about these channels. Not everyone is a master storyteller. Yes, Kristen. That's the point about this channel. It's not for entertainment. It's that so people that need to tell what experience they had, they can share it and not be judged for it. So I'll be honest, it doesn't matter if you think it's entertaining or not, guys. It is what it is. Episode 375, The Cabin Creature of Sevierville. User writes, we were there in Gatlinburg in 2022, a rental up on the mountain just to the right at the end of the city. We heard screams about 2 a.m., not elk, not fox, not cat. It was coming from the mountains behind Anakeesta. It was amazing. Sounded very similar to the Ohio howl my Steve never believed till that night. Episode 495, Sasquatch Siege of Rainier, Oregon. Foot Clan 5281 writes, I find evidence of them all over Colorado, and I think there are even more of them in Oregon. Since it's so densely forested, reach out. Let's talk about what you found. Barb's episode, Our Property is Surrounded. 426. Bravo 1344. Ready for me to start? Have you got a pen? Well, that could be interpreted a few ways, but if you're saying you have a lot of things to share, then please reach out. Going back to the Rainier episode, Kevel RPM writes, I currently live in Rainier, Oregon on A Street and am an avid outdoorsman and hunter. We do have an active Sasquatch population here, but they aren't as negative as portrayed. I have a house on East A Street that was built in 1890, and I hunt this area. 100% we have a large community of Bigfoot that everyone are used to dealing with. I've also had many other experiences, but living here has definitely added to my life 100%. I'll email. Kevel, I don't think I've received your email yet. Please, if you hear this, reach out. I would love to have a different viewpoint of what is happening around Rainier, Oregon with the active current Sasquatch. Anyone else that hears this that's from the Rainier, Oregon area and knows information about current Sasquatch in the area, please reach out. Pennsylvania police officer episode. Jer Hetrick writes, grew up in Elk County, PA, St. Mary's, spending a lot of my time in the forest around East Branch Dam area. I never had a Bigfoot encounter out there, and as I said, I grew up hunting, exploring, fishing, Barrendale, East Branch Dam, Kinsua, Cowder Sport, West Creek. Oddly enough, me and my son did experience something sitting on my back porch that was 100% not natural, native to Pennsylvania, where we now live in Luzerne County near Ricketts Glen. Reach out. I'd love to hear more about it. Back to the Rainier, Oregon episode. BC 1016 writes, I remember this episode from 11 months ago. I must have listened to it dozens of times when it first was put up, along with Sasquatch Chronicles episode 786. What that means is that Wade's story was originally on Sasquatch Chronicles. So if you want to hear a little bit more about it, you can go over to that podcast and you can listen to episode 786. You may have heard of Sasquatch Chronicles. I'm just kidding. Everyone's heard of Sasquatch Chronicles. The area Wade and his family lived in has a long history of Bigfoot activity that goes back about 100 years at least. There's a lot of stories told about this area. Of all the stories ever encountered with Bigfoot in these locations, Rainier is the one place I would investigate first. I want to repeat what I mentioned in a previous episode of Sasquatch Chronicles. Go to Sasquatch Chronicles episode 57. 4 to 32 minutes in where the encounter starts, listen to the old man named John tell his Bigfoot story that happened to him in the late 40s when he was a young man. The location was between Rainier and Clay Skinny. Cool. BC, I'd love to talk to you if you know a lot about the Bigfoot encounter stories that have happened around Rainier. I'd love to talk to you. This one came in on one of the Bigfoot Encounter live call-in shows, which happens every Saturday night at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube. Teresa writes, I had a glass bead, light sky blue, gifted to me in Central Oregon. It was one of those big cabochons. Not sure what a cabochon is. Maybe it's probably a glass bead. It was very bright, and my boyfriend and I were the only ones on the trail. We walked out to a huge boulder that hung out over the river to sit in the sun and drink some water. And on the way off the rock, there it was on this giant boulder as we stepped off when we got up to get back on the trail. There's no way it was already there, as I was aware of everything on the boulder as I was looking down at the entire area as I walked out on the boulder so I would not trip on anything as we were hiking in a wild area. I've also had intuitive knowing where these beings are twice on hikes. I was at Soldock Hot Springs with my friend and would not go on a hike there because I knew they were up there. I was told with impressions and warnings not to go. I didn't, and my friend was a little angry. I had an experience as well in Packwood, Washington, mountain biking into Lake Packwood, where I stopped to get a drink and rest as it was in the 80s and I was being watched. I knew. I got on that bike and got out of there. I've never seen one, though. Also, on Fox Island in Gig Harbor, leaving my boyfriend's house in about 2004, and as I was leaving, I heard my name called from the forest next to his driveway. I answered back. It was a long circular driveway and came from the lower end near the street. I thought it was a neighbor. I said, hold on, I'll drive down. I did, nothing and nobody there. Also, baseball-sized electric blue light bulbs falling past my car windshield on my way home on other occasions. Some other things happened in connection to that area as well. Very, very interesting. Here's a really interesting comment that came in on the Cindy episode from the Hoodoo Mountain area of Idaho. Chris writes, what happens if Bigfoot is discovered officially? Would that put an end to the podcast? Maybe not right away, but after the initial excitement, I'm wondering what would be left to say after the mystery is solved. Bittersweet, huh? No, I would keep going with it. People are still going to be experiencing things and needing to work through things, so I'll still be here. But yeah, good idea, though. It made me think about it for a bit. Same episode, Jesty Psy 4205. I just got chills. Last fall around 2 a.m. in the morning, I heard what sounded like ambulance sounds coming from the woods across from me. I'm in Beaver, PA. There's 25 acres of land across from me, 40 acres of land next to that, isolated in woods. The sound was very different. It was almost muffled in like a static sound or something. I recorded it and had girls at my work listen to it, and one of the girls made a joke and said, well, maybe it's Bigfoot, which is strange. What was strange was I had thought that even before she said it, but didn't take it too seriously. I didn't think too much of it and deleted my video recording of it. Oh, no. After that, I've been getting more into this and was when I realized that's what I had to have recorded that night. There's no other explanation of what it could have been. There's nothing around me. The sound was different than police cars or ambulances. It was along the lines of whoops and a bunch of them, just a different sound deep in the woods. Something I never heard before in my life, but best I could describe it was always an ambulance or siren sound. Back to the delivery man. Conservatives writes, I grew up south of this location in a mountain range that separates the desert from the coastal valleys. I've heard there's been a couple sightings. I never saw anything, but there was a few times where I was way out there and my blood just ran cold with terror. Just one moment, everything was cool. The next minute, just heart racing, fight or flight. It wasn't the normal fear of cougars or being scared of getting caught crossing some crazy person's property. That was normal, everyday kind of fear. This fear was just sudden, out of nowhere, total ice-cold fear. In an older episode, which is Terrified at This Ohio Park, S.A. Fit Private, 1997, writes, I saw one at Salt Fork about 9 years ago on the trail to the stone house. I was walking by myself, stopped to look at the beautiful fall leaves, and as I looked to my left up the hillside, it stood up. It had been crouching behind some bushes. Oh my goodness. Bushes or shrubs. It stared at me for a minute and then took up over the hill. I went up the hill after it, but I didn't see anything else, just woods. Really interesting. There's an older episode where I talked to Daryl Denton about LBL. Jesse Gallego writes, yep, we got them in Oregon right outside the Rogue Valley. Jesse, reach on out. A lot of people have enjoyed the Held Against Our Will by Our Bigfoot Family at Turkey Run State Park episode. Gasaberhagen writes, I've been debating if I should share what follows. I've elected to proceed for several reasons. Make of it what you will. About a week ago, I was listening to a Bigfoot podcast. I'd become somewhat absorbed over the course of about a year or more with this enigma. However, about a week ago, I was sitting in my kitchen thinking of concocting ways of having a personal encounter with such a creature. For the record, I live in the center of Washington, D.C. Secondly, I don't have much discretionary income to finance an expedition into the hinterlands for such an objective. Back to me in my kitchen, so I'm having this mental journey of being in nature seeking the being. I'm of the thought that everything wants a gift. So in my mind, I ask the being, what does he want me to bring him as a gift? Or to bring as a gift a prism. This response was immediate and clear, so I don't know if it's plausible that many of these beings might want to be gifted one or what. I feel as if I'm just relaying a message. Thank you. Very interesting. Also, on the Turkey Run episode, at Turkey Run 2 years ago, I camped around 3 a.m., sitting near woods looking at stars. A loud whoop, whoop, ah, or ah, who knows? It's hard to discern what the ah sound was like. Next to me in the woods, it was communicating back and forth with another less than a quarter of a mile. I stayed outside till it got really quiet, then went into the camper. I believe they're there, but I don't know what animal it was till I looked up the call it made. Very, very interesting. On the events of the 2023 BFRO Washington Expedition, episode 436, AAA reacts. I've had my fair share of BF encounters in PNW, paranormal and UFOs, not same time, different places in Washington. Reach out, my friend. Episode 493, years of Bigfoot interaction in Estacada, Oregon. Ruin Temple writes, my partner lives right off of Wildcat Mountain Road on Van Kuren. Last summer, we had mysterious, incredibly loud wood cracking sounds in the trees that line the tiny creek that runs along the south border of his family's 5 acres up there that would go on all night long for weeks and weeks on end. We never found out what was doing it, but one night my partner scared off a coyote by spraying his pellet gun into the woods so it wouldn't get our kitties. And we never heard the word wood cracking again after that. I'd love to find someone to go field researching with, but I'm of the flesh and blood denomination. I currently have heart failure until I get a valve replaced, so I don't know if I could physically hack it if it were grueling on the body. But man, I feel like I have so much potential and a lot to offer as amateur research, citizen scientist, incredibly curious, analytically minded learner. Your health comes first, my friend. But if you know an area where stuff like that happens, Maybe you could put some sound recorders out and see if you can record something. Who knows? Roger Williams' episode from Squatch and Holler, number 260. Brecca Marie 1 writes, I live on State Line, Middle Tennessee, about 80 miles south of Nashville, just a few miles from the Alabama border, in a very small rural community. About 2 a.m. one night, I was surprised by deep growling followed by what I can only compare with a distressed cow-like sound right outside my office window. I'd been gaming on my PC and thought my cat was outside and possibly cornered off with a neighbor's loose cow, because that's what my brain rationalized. Since then, the Ohio call is pretty similar to what I heard, except more octave change and faster. I listened to it for about a minute, trying to figure out what I was hearing. Finally, I stood up to go save my cat and check on my neighbor's cows. When I did, I looked out my window, which had its curtains open, and there were two reflective yellow-green glowing eyes staring at me from outside, and the noise had stopped. We stared at each other for several seconds. My first reaction was a person watching me. I don't know why, especially as these eyes were glowing. I was actually pretty terrified, and as I stared at them, they turned and passed by my window. The next day, after it dawned on me, human eyes are not reflective, I went out and measured where the eyes hit. It was about the 5'9" mark on my window if it had been standing right up against the glass. It wasn't, so whatever this was had to be taller, at least 6 feet. We don't have animals that tall here in Tennessee, and I could explain away the sound, but not the eyes. I thought maybe lightning bugs, but the glow was lit for way too long, and it was 42 degrees that night. I have no explanation, and as a scientist, that bothers me pretty deeply. I can't say I had a Bigfoot encounter, but maybe a series of events came together, maybe to tell my brain something was outside my window. Our brains will result to paranormal when all other explanations don't work. I just don't have the truth yet. Pennsylvania police officer episode, Lost with Lobes writes, I've heard strange things in the Allegheny National Forest, specifically the Hickory Creek Wilderness area. Please reach out. Hoodoo Mountains, Idaho episode, Loco Vaso says, I'm in East Texas, Big Thicket Estates. Lots going on. Reach out, my friend. So interesting comment here from CO. No, I'm saying this wrong. You already told me how to do it. Coxie, I think, from Southeast Oklahoma, real estate, Denny's episode. Super interesting interview to me. This has long vexed me as a buyer looking whether real estate agents, home sellers are required to be honest in disclosing Sasquatch activity on properties, both if asked directly or just to volunteer the info. I know real estate disclosure rules vary state to state, but when it comes to Sasquatch, does that's just a joke supersede the discussion and make a genuine inquiry not taken seriously? I asked at a community forum for a town in Western Washington, and a real estate agent replied, but along with most others who replied, she ridiculed me a bit more politely than the others, but clearly implied that I would likely not get an honest answer. Meanwhile, 14 people contacted me via private message to share their encounters in the area, which again just underscores how ridicule dominates the topic at large. There could be so many implications. What if a prospective buyer has children, especially, or lots of animals? What if something ended up happening to a child or animals? Could a real estate agent or property owner who knew but did not reveal be held guilty of non-disclosure? That's a lot to carry on your conscience. What if a prospective buyer made it known they wanted a Sasquatch property specifically because they wanted to bag a Sasquatch? How would you handle that? I guess now, if I start looking at rural properties, knowing what I know now, I'd be compelled to walk every square foot of the property to look for signs. Maybe even asked to spend a night or 7 to see what happens when the sun goes down. So many questions. Thanks for this interview. I really look forward to more info on the real estate, property buying, selling issue. Bring it on. Thank you so much. That's a really interesting discussion. There's a lot of people I've talked to, actually, some off air, where they bought a property and they didn't know about the Bigfoot history. That's something to think about. Also, thank you for your email you sent a while back. I'd love to talk to you. I think I sent you one back as well. So, episode 333, which is out in Packwood area. Teresa writes, I had a Lake Packwood incident as well. I grew up in Washington and have many, many stories of very strange happenings, some of which are not necessarily Bigfoot related. I'd still love to talk to you, Teresa. Please reach out. 255 Alabama hunter Eddie Welch 3160 writes, I hunt the same forest, Bankhead National Forest. Me and my dad have encountered them there. I got a picture of one that was stalking us and throwing rocks. I shared the story on Alabama Bigfoot Society. Host's name was Jim. Bankhead has a lot of BF action. John speaks the truth. Maybe one day I can share it here. Well, yeah, definitely reach out, friend. Fisherman the Bigfoot 498 Wolf One Rescue. I have a Bigfoot story from Gold Beach on the Rogue River in Oregon. I saw him. Please reach out. On Dwayne's episode 466, Terrence Barber writes, homeless and just lost my job today, mentally and physically drained. Listening to these encounters gives me a small peace of mind. Friend, you can get back at it. I know you can do it. Hang in there, my friend. I'm glad that listening to the show gives you peace of mind. I know a lot of people listen to the show that are having a lot of really tough things going on. Health-wise, they can't sleep, all sorts of things people have told me, and I'm glad that listening to this one show helps them to be able to go on. You are important. You are needed here. Please continue. Continue to keep going on, my friend. Thank you. Cindy's episode, Hoodoo Mountain, Idaho. Meredith Channels writes, I'm in North Idaho, born in East Washington. My grandpa was born in Athol, Idaho, by where this gal lives. Family all over that area. Blanchard, Idaho, in the 1950s. My great uncle died of sun exposure at 6 years old on a lake dock in Blanchard, Idaho. Sorry to hear that. Deep, deep roots in Sandpoint and Bonner area, too. We also seem to share mutual friends who are investigators. I'm not myself an investigator. I'm a lifelong experiencer since age 5 between Colville, Spokane, Yakima, Crystal Mountains, Silver Valley, all of North Idaho up to Canada, Oklahoma, Broken Arrow area, Lewiston, Orofino, Grangeville, and more. They tag you if you've ever seen one. I believe that. She talks about our local tribes. I grew up with many of the tribal members locally. Coeur d'Alene, I know I'm saying that wrong, I apologize, Colville, Nez Perce, and Yakima nations. They are confederated tribes now, but have varying perspectives on Bigfoot. I've had sightings myself, but I can tell you one of the scariest stories I've ever heard told to me. Not my own, and I've had high strangeness as well. It's out of Inchelium, Washington, west of tribal land. The Bigfoot was approximately 15 feet tall. He said it was impossibly large. It was too mind-boggling, and this was in the 1970s. The Colville member stopped hunting in that same valley forever. The sheer size was too overwhelming, and he was afraid for his sons and he ever to go back. His ancient family hunted there. Bigfoot messed with bow hunters. I have many stories from tribal members as we share these first-hand sightings in common, and my past work with Fish and Game brought me to also know the local tribal wildlife people, not to mention. I go fishing and still have personal relations with the tribal members, Eastern Washington and North Idaho, this lady talks about. Not everyone will see a Bigfoot when they are around. They choose who they show themselves to. I believe that. Some people say they come across by accident. I'm on the fence with that one, though. There's a lot we don't know. If you seek, ye shall find. That's a Bigfoot mantra, and it's true. Perhaps why she hasn't had a first-hand encounter. They can interpret her as wanting to see one or something of the sort. They are to be respected. I hope she finds the answers she's looking for. I know they're ancient beings. I've already given some of my encounters on a past show. Love the Bigfoot Society channel, guys. Jeremiah does so much for the topic, such a special person. If you have any encounters to talk about, reach out to him via email. Thank you. He edits his content for you on interviews, so you don't need to be nervous or self-conscious. It's pretty painless, and I personally encourage it. The weirder the encounter, the better. LOL. We are all just working. Thank you, my friend, for reaching out. I really appreciate the kind words. If you have more to share, you can also reach out again. Back to the Turkey Run episode. Brett Ham in 1967 writes, I've hiked Turkey Run many times. I know there have been a few Bigfoot stories around the park. Also, you're exceedingly patient and kind interviewer. Thank you, Brett. Also, reach out if you'd like to share the Bigfoot stories you've heard around the park, because I knew that there were more, I just didn't know them. Harley Owen's second episode, researching the area that horrified Scott Carpenter. Joshua writes, I'm from Western North Carolina and have what I believe is Bigfoot tree structures, footprints in my yard and on my porch, and I recorded a very strange sound that literally lasted for several hours. It was a drawn-out, mournful, crying sound, and I've had a couple men listen and both said they had no idea what it was. They never heard anything like it, but whatever it was, it had big lungs because the sound lasted a long time from start to end of each howl cry. Feel free to email me if you'd like to share that, my friend. Also on the Turkey Run episode, TF8837 writes, so when I lived in Indiana, we always liked to stay at Turkey Run, but it was packed a lot, so we would go to Shades State Park when that happened. I had such a scare at around 2 a.m. with sounds and then gunfire. I literally threw my kids in the truck, left our stuff, and got out of there. I returned the next day, picked up our stuff, and never returned. Ooh, that's scary stuff. An old friend, Swamp Dog, good to see you, friend, writes on 498, Fisherman and the Bigfoot. That encounter with John in York County PA is interesting. I heard about many encounters in that area. I used to haul lumber to and from there with Amish customers and heard stories about the hairy man. It's pretty awesome, dude. We got to talk. I know you've been reaching out. We got to talk again, dude. We're going to make it happen. The original Rainier, Oregon episode, 293, Clifford Lloyd writes, amazing story being from Vancouver, Portland. I'm quite aware of the various encounters people have claimed I've had. Interestingly speaking, not many have really come forward to give up their stories, such as you have, yet I know there have been an awfully lot being held back. It would be nice if more people would step forward and reveal just how serious and active it is around us, and I'm talking real close, such as you were to the city. Just outside of Portland, from a few miles past Sandy to the Mount Hood Range, from the Columbia River Gorge, headed all yacht to St. Helens, all around both sides, west and south, west of Scappoose, up into the hills. Many loggers have had their share of experiences, but you really don't have anyone coming out and fully telling their stories. There's one heck of a population of these characters raising a lot more heck than we're being told. I believe the population of Bigfoot families or tribes are in greater abundance than we realized, and any of us taking a Sunday stroll in the woods really do need to be cautiously aware. These stories and encounters need to be taken quite seriously because we're still having a lot of disappearances. Clifford, if you have stories you would like to share, please feel free to reach out. Back to Cindy's Hoodoo Mountain episode, Mike Nord writes, hi, I have a northern Idaho story to share. I was in the national forest between Sandpoint and Bonner Ferry, Idaho. Please reach out, my friend. I've been starting to make some shorts. This one was about Post Oak, Virginia. Mainland Mitch says they're deep in Quantico. Used to camp there as a kid. Please reach out and share what you know, my friend. Denny's Real Estate Oklahoma episode, Cairo Now writes, when I was about 7 or 8, I remember my dad coming in saying a farmer was yelling at some teenagers to get off his property and they were scaring his horses. The farmer claims he saw a man run through his field and scared his horse so bad it cut itself to death on his barbed fence. The other horse badly injured. The man unbelievably jumped the canal. The canal was cemented and was so wide not even an Olympian could jump it, even if it had an island to land on and take another leap. The sheriff was there and they loaded the horse onto a trailer. This was in South Weber, Utah, or most closely Uinta, Utah, near Layton or Riverdale, a town with about 6 stop signs. I was born in 1972, so I'm sure you can find some sort of record of it. I will never forget the unbelief on my dad's face. It was near the river and over the bridge that splits Uinta and South Weber. On a short I did about Dayton, Ohio, citing Davy Mack writes, great info and a great website you have. Many good, honest witnesses. I've had 2 sightings in Clark County, Ohio, adjacent to Montgomery County, 2 sightings in Champaign County, Ohio, and my first one in Greene County, Ohio, at John Bryan State Park in summer 1969 when I was 10 years old. I love that Matt M, but he will simply not respond to me when I reached out to him several times. I continue to listen to your great podcast. Davey, reach out. Let's talk about what you've encountered. On the 9 years of horrifying Bigfoot encounters in Oregon, Donna Spencer writes, Bigfoot command respect Jeremiah, everyone and everything, just by their presence and size. Yes, Bigfoots do cloak like the predator. Maybe some of the movies we see are true. I've seen them come out of portals. One mind spoke to me to tell me he was there to protect me. I saw one as a child in 2017 while I was on my job in my backyard. In the portal, it was daylight, but in our world, it was nighttime. I heard monkeys and owls together, and one left greasy lip prints on my driver's side window. Donna, I have already said it in this episode, but please reach out to me. On an old shore I did, moving forward rights happened to us. We laughed and knocked back. A week later, it had us leave. Would love to talk to you about your experience. As you may already know, I did a really intense episode with Henry Franzoni about what happened to me in Oak Ridge, Oregon during Sasquatch Summerfest. There's been some really interesting comments. And for the most part, most of you have been really nice. Thank you. Some of you, not so much, but hey, it is what it is. Sparky Plug 788 writes, it was a great pleasure to meet you there, Jeremiah. I am the man that brought you the rocks. Thank you, my friend. Those rocks helped keep the maps down very, very nicely. I hope to see you there next year as well. I won't say your real name because I don't want to give your identity away if that's an issue, but I really appreciate hanging out with you. Yeah, thank you. The rocks were great. that was really cool of you. On another short, Million Kelly, a friend of mine saw one near there about 10 years ago. I'd love to hear more about that. Jackie writes on the Oak Ridge, Oregon recap episode, Jeremiah, you absolutely did see one. I've heard so many times of people saying they saw what could have been one for a split second. The mind is a funny thing. Oftentimes, our mind convinces us that it was shadow play if the sighting was a super short time. Super happy for you. Thank you, Jackie, for your kind words. A lot of people were enjoying episode 501, the Overton County, Tennessee episode. Whippoorwill writes, Jeremiah, you always take the time to choose beautiful images relative to the area being spoken about in the video. I try. I don't have really awesome images for each location, but I do try. Thank you. This one was a doozy. Took some time to look at Overton County on a map. There are a lot of caves. It seems to be the perfect habitat with multiple water sources too. Could go on, but the human voice mimicking and luring is concerning. I agree. They're absolutely being watched and interacted with. Would definitely look into the history of the land and, if possible, speak to neighbors to see if they've had any interactions. I'm wondering if the young lady's like an antenna. This land seems it could get to the level of the Carter farm. Could they possibly have gone to isolate her? Betcha. There's a lot of paranormal and supernatural activity too. Wow, I'd just be really, really careful. If a person would want all of this to stop, they might not be able to. Bark chatter equals squirrel. Would love to see an aerial of this area. Possible portal equals latitude, longitude, rocks, water. Also, I will continue to think that there's a connection with veterans and current enlisted. Would love to see data of experiences with veterans, etc. Jeremiah, is that something you could ask in interviews? Betcha it's high. Thank you for the video. A lot of really interesting thoughts in there. Thank you for sharing. A short I did about Plano, Illinois, and the sighting. ZNA Productions, right? I had bizarre deep voice chanting a few yards outside my tent in a triplet tree knock around 1 a.m. on a hunting trip last fall in Polo, Illinois. Mind you, this is before any of this stuff was on my radar at all. I told my dad, and he sent me a Sasquatch Theory interview about sightings in Illinois, and I've been hooked ever since. Thank you for sharing that. Back to the Pennsylvania police officer episode 425. Darren writes, I'm from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. One time, me and my mother took a ride to a casino in Wisconsin. We would take a back way there, turning at a place called Land O'Lakes, and drive through back swamp country to get there. We were taking the same way back about 3 a.m. At the turn about 20 miles to Land O'Lakes, we saw an 8-foot creature walking down the back road. It was the biggest The biggest muscular and shaped thing I've ever saw at first. I thought it was going to attack. It seemed to gain ground fast. I quickly looked to see if my mom's safety belt was on and thought the only chance is to ram it. I took the turn and it switched across my left and jumped into a deep ditch. The strange thing is at first we were in shock watching it and how close it got. All of a sudden, it had a deep reddish fur look, and I was absolutely petrified. I was doing 80 on a swamp road. Darren, reach out if you'd like to. Horrifying Bigfoot Tales of Montana, episode 400. Thomas writes, I saw a Bigfoot 2 days after a violent storm brought down trees and homes near Highway 8 in Wisconsin, about 5 miles east of the Minnesota-Wisconsin border. This creature had large arms and walked upright. He appeared disoriented. He was very much aware of me as I stopped by the truck. At the same time, he stopped too. Then he walked directly in front of my vehicle with no fear. I was able to get an up-close look. My body shut down for a few minutes, and I couldn't move while in his presence. My theory is that due to the rise in seismos, earthquakes, the Bigfoot are being forced to come up and out of their homes, fleeing from the dangers of tectonic plates shifting occurring below the Earth's surface. That's a really cool idea. Also, in another Montana episode, 408, Noel Ox says, hey, encounter by Menlo, Iowa. It's not about your car's warranty. It's about a creature I can't explain near a golf course I worked at in a military base. Man, that's a really interesting comment, and I would love to hear more since I'm an Iowa person as well, as you already know. On the South Dakota episode, 399, Milo writes, I've been camping at Cushman my whole life, 46 years. I've heard them screaming up there many times. Sounds like a woman screaming bloody murder. I found their prints in the mud one time. Beautiful prints. They're absolutely up at Cushman. It's the Olympics. Interesting. Back to the Overton County, Tennessee episode. Firstifer writes, this whole area of Middle East Tennessee is a huge Bigfoot area. So much protected land and a few people. Tennessee has more caves than any other state. Catoosa, WMA, Frozen Head, and Lone Mountain State Forest, and Big South Fork, among the biggest, all generally in the same area. I had my first experience in Lone Mountain State Forest, and I've heard of many more in these areas. Firstifer, you've left a lot of really good comments over the last few years. I would love to talk to you someday. You're more than welcome to reach out. Same episode. My mom's side of the family is from Pea Ridge and Salina, which is Clay County, and the story from all the family is my family hit a Bigfoot driving in Jonathan's Holler. Byron. User Byron, I would love to talk to you about this, to find more information about this story of your grandfather hitting a Bigfoot driving Jonathan's Holler. Please reach out to me. Sasquatch Terror on the Cumberland Plateau episode. Glenn Ramsey writes, I live in East Tennessee, close to where Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia all meet up. I've heard a few stories. I would love to talk to you about them. Reach out, my friend. Overton County episode, RRMO Van Life. The wild people in my life like nacho cheese Doritos and let me know they want the red bag, not the blue bag the other day, LOL. I let them know next time I go to the lake, I will be sure to bring them the red bag this time, LOL. Do you open the cans of soup or do they open them themselves? I enjoy listening to people's experiences. It helps to know I'm not the only one living a strange life. I think everyone probably likes the red bag over the blue bag, to be honest, but maybe that's just me. Reach out. It sounds like you've got some interesting stuff going on. Back to my Oak Ridge, Oregon recap episode. Leanne Kennedy left me a comment that really made me think for a long time. And she's absolutely right. The tones in your voice are ones that most of us recognize in our own, Jeremiah. You're right. And thank you for being kind enough and intuitive enough to recognize that. I'm working through it and I'm okay. Horrifying Bigfoot Tales of Montana. Kevin writes, Bigfoot is real and he's on the Flathead. I'm full-blood Native American and seen him. Would love to talk to you, friend. On a short, Jacob writes, I live in Southwest Virginia, famous for the devil monkey wood booger. Always laughed at people about their encounters till one night fishing, one screamed at me. Then a few days later, something hurled a huge boulder at me in broad daylight. I'm a believer now for certain. Back to the Plano, Illinois short, Sasquatch 8923. Hey man, love the cast, quickly becoming my favorite. I just want to say thank you. I appreciate everyone that listens to this podcast. I know you guys could listen to so many other podcasts, but I appreciate you listening to one that I put out, and I have to always remember that people do actually listen to this thing. I just do it because I love the subject, and I want to have people be able to share what they've experienced so that they can get back in control and learn about what happened to them. So thank you for that. Appreciate that. But user writes, I live at the base of Mount Hood in Oregon. Had an encounter in 2018 with my son. I thought Bigfoot was a possibility, but didn't give it much thought. We did research over the next 2 years and collected so much evidence we've stopped gathering because we didn't know what to do with all of it. I've shown some of it to Cliff at his museum. He told me I had an encounter 100 feet from the spot we had ours. Crazy. You have got to reach out. I would love to talk to you, my friend. Back to the Oak Ridge, Oregon. Mock writes, my experience at 17 taught me that most folks have no clue about these forest people. Once was quite enough. Even today, I still find myself looking into the timber when I drive my route every day. Scared us. Reach out, my friend, if you'd like to share. On the Oak Ridge Conversation episode, Brian writes, wow, Jeremiah, so how do you feel now? Do you feel differently than before you went out to Oak Ridge? Brian, it's interesting that you would say that. I'm not quite sure why you would ask that, but I feel like a completely different person, actually. And I've said that multiple times to people. I'm not the same person that I came back. The person that went out to Oregon is not the same person that came back here. It's very hard to explain, but you hit the nail on the head, my friend. Also, friend Josh writes, Jeremiah gets to go from tent zipper to chest thumping howl. We need special buttons or pins for each type of encounter, like in the Scouts. He needs a button. Also, I noticed Jeremiah's legs, and I thought maybe he stepped in poison ivy or he got bit by a spider. Raspberries around his calf, and they were turning purple by the end of the fest. So much happened at Oak Ridge, I couldn't keep track of it all. Yeah, Josh was able to see it happen in real time. That's really interesting. I was extremely lucky that the person I interviewed gave me the strong recommendation to go to the doctor immediately, and I think that really saved me a lot. Another interesting comment, Overtime 51 says, what would you ask what is roaring at us from the woods? You're out there for that very reason. I hate when Bigfoot researchers pretend they don't understand what these sounds could be. Okay, so I get it. I know it, dude. I get it. I get it because I've had that thought many times. I didn't go out there to research Bigfoot. I went out there to interview people for the podcast. It just so happened that I got brought out into that same area where Ronnie and Dwayne were. I didn't go out there. I thought, well, maybe it would happen, but it happened. It's a different experience when you're in that situation and it's real life and your mind just freaks out on you because your mind is just trying to logically be like, what's happening? What's happening? And you start babbling and you're like, what? Why is this happening to us? We can't figure this out. We don't get what's going on. So I get it. It's very frustrating to hear that as a person. But when you are there in that situation, it's the most logical thing that your brain can do in that situation. And I don't really know how to explain it. So until you experience it yourself, all I can ask is that you have patience and try to understand. But yeah, I get it that it's very frustrating. In the country episode, L. writes, I'm located in Northern California and they are so scattered around and hard to find. I've run into some of them passing by. Still looking for a family family unit. But down in the south, just have to find a little forest and bam, there you go. If you got something to share, definitely reach out. On the Oak Ridge conversation, A-Train writes, you may want to focus on the areas east of Cottage Grove as well. I saw one about a mile west of the Spirit Falls trailhead on the road that parallels Lane Creek. A-Train, there's a lot of stuff that happens outside the podcast that I look into, and you never know what might be coming next. I'll just say that. But yeah, reach out. Back to the Oak Ridge Conversation episodes. Kai writes, thank you for sharing. I know there's much more in that subconscious mind. They forest folk love to dump into you. It's all for you to grow spiritually and wake up. I don't know how to respond to that, but I'm sure the way I'll think about it in the future is different than I think about it now. So we'll just see what happens. And there's a lot that happened that week that I'm still trying to figure out. So we'll see. Tim Dill's episode 503, Samson Mudd writes, I had an encounter in the Winding Stairs Gap area of Macon County, North Carolina. Mr. Dill should be familiar since it connects with the Standing Indian area that he mentioned. Samson, please reach out. Plano, Illinois sighting short said, Reno says he was on the Big Muddy River near Ziegler, Illinois, tracks along the river in my backyard. The dogs got used to him. He doesn't bother anyone. Jamie also writes, back in 1982, my friend and I saw one in Weedron, LaSalle County, Illinois, which is about 15-20 miles south of Plano. Creepy, but fascinating. Definitely. Any comments I'm reading, guys, please reach out. Back to Cindy's episode in Hoodoo Mountain. AK Wolfsong writes, I've lived in northern Idaho and they were aggressive but restrained. However, up here in Alaska, where I live now, they're aggressive. I mean, they each have their own personality. Some are more aggressive than others, but in general, they don't want you around and they will let you know it. Would love to talk to you. It amazes me all the content you put out. A big thank you for that, Felicia. Thanks. I appreciate someone appreciating that. Pugilist writes, listening from the United Kingdom, this guy's accent is hard to understand. Someone responded, Max responded with, hit your closed caption icon. Yeah, if you listen on YouTube, you can actually read it. So there you go. Rodney writes on the Overton County, Tennessee episode, I live near the Tennessee line in North Carolina. We have these animals here, and I have a home in Oliver Springs, Tennessee, and I've had some encounters there. Love the podcast. Thank you. Would love to talk to you, Rodney. Please reach out. On the Tim Dills episode, Wasatch writes, great interview. He definitely has some of the accent from that particular region. My parents run a tourist ruby mine in Macon County for 6 years every summer, and I would go there to work between college semesters several times. Macon County and the whole area, Natahala National Forest, etc., has some of the best forest anywhere in the country. Most my dad ever heard was little rocks being thrown on the tin roof of the old farmhouse at the forest edge. He didn't know what it was at the time, but reflecting back now, he wonders. On the Prince of Wales Island episode, the original one, Julie writes, my friend from Flint, Michigan, said he's seen a predator type thing in his tree years ago. Have him reach out. Half of the interviews for Bigfoot Society come through the comments. If you've had an encounter or anything to share, much like these comments I just read, please put these in the comments of the episode. But if you really want to make sure that you reach out to me, you can email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Again, thank you for listening, and you guys have a good one. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list. If you've had any encounters in Oregon, which I'm sure there's probably a few of you out there, please feel free to reach out immediately. You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.
Her and I can get on here and we can tell our stories. Maybe there's somebody else out there listening that's too afraid to tell their story. Maybe this will give them the courage to come out and not feel so bad about it. Who cares what anybody thinks? I know what I saw. I know what's out there. That's all I care about.
Let people know. Please let them know. If you ever see one of these things, you need to tell. Because if you don't, then shame on you. You know? Shame on you.